It was a Super 8 experimental project where we can see a young Madonna poolside wearing a bikini. First, she's eating raw eggs, spitting them, and laughing. Then, she's laying on the floor. Another girl in a bikini comes and cracks an egg on her belly. Then, the girl leaves, and when she comes back, and with the effect of the song, the egg has fried on Madonna's body. The other girl eats the perfectly cooked sunny side egg with a fork and knife from Madonna's belly. Hi! Welcome back to Judas of Disturbia. I am Raf, and this episode is a celebration. A celebration of many things. A celebration of my comeback to the podcast because, yes, I needed a little retrospection about the content of GOD, a little rest to my voice, and some time to actually produce better content I am more proud of. It's also a celebration that Madonna's celebration tour is now a reality and that I actually have tickets to the show. By the way, I will talk about that at the end of this episode, all we know, and my experience and budget when getting the tickets. And then this is also part 1 of the first episode of a series I will call their first Rolling Stone cover, in which I will talk not about the specific first mention of an artist at the Rolling Stone magazine, but about the first time on the cover of this iconic publication, and the topics that were talked about in the interview, divided in small, easy to digest chapters. I think that their first cover at this magazine is going to give us a great summarized idea of what the intent of this career was from the beginning, and will let us explore if the idea evolved, changed, or if these pop culture icons have actually accomplished what they wanted from the start. So, as a first episode on this series, this one is a celebration, and what a better way to start than with Madonna, one of the icons with the most Rolling Stone covers ever. She has been on the cover of this magazine 23 times at least. So, if her new tour will showcase 40 years of her music, let's stop repeating the word celebration so often and let's travel back to November 22, 1984, almost 39 years ago, to celebrate Madonna's first Rolling Stone magazine cover. And let's explore this interview. First, let's talk about the cover itself. And let me tell you that already in this picture, you can see through Madonna's fierce eyes 3 of the key factors of her success, according to me. Her ambition, the way how she is always in control of her own sensuality, and her legit connection with eroticism. She looks ready to take you on her journey with her, so you can see how she becomes the queen of pop, because she already knew she was going exactly there. In the picture, she's wearing red lipstick, her signature beauty mark, and her eyebrows are as thick as we see in girls in these times, but they are less put together. I would call them rock eyebrows or even Madonna eyebrows, because to me, when you think thick eyebrows, you first think about Madonna in the 1980s. Her hair is classic 80s hair, touching the shoulders, very put together. Lots of hair products to look very messy but very cool. I really like 80s hair because it's not shy. That hair says a lot of the moment the person that has it is living. I have to say that this interview was done and published over a year after the release of her debut album titled Madonna, and if you remember the cover of that album, she has short blonde hair on the picture. Actually, on YouTube you can find a video of what is supposed to be the first time Madonna performed Everybody, her first single, live on stage, and she has the same short hair as on the cover of her album. So at the point this picture was taken, she was already in the transition to the look she had on her second album, Like a Virgin. But we will talk about that later. This picture was taken by her friend Steven Meisel, who, if you don't know, is considered one of the most important fashion photographers ever for his work on different publications that at some point have been owned by Condé Nast, like Vogue, Vogue Italia, British Vogue, and W, but also for all the pictures that he has taken of his friend Madonna, including the ones for her 1992 book named Sex, which at some point I want to make an episode about in this podcast. This interview/article, which is titled Madonna Goes All the Way, and which is what I will talk about in this episode, was made by Emmy winner journalist Chris Connelly, who you may recognize from his work on ESPN or Good Morning America. By the way, it is possible that we will explore more of his work in this series because back in the day he started his career as a music critic for Rolling Stone, hashtag my dream job. And during his time there, he wrote the first cover interviews for celebrities and bands like Madonna, Sean Penn, Tom Cruise, U2, and many others. I have to say that I do not have the physical version of this edition of Rolling Stone. I read the article in the website, but I will leave a link to it on the description so you can go and check it after you listen to this episode. Also, please remember to add this podcast to your favorite ones on every platform possible. Share it on all places possible and to everyone possible. And please leave me a 5-star review and a good comment if you like my content. That will really help me to keep working on this content. Thank you in advance. Let's keep going. The picture inside of the article, at least on the digital version, shows Madonna wearing an iconic, undeniably recognizable classic 80s Madonna look. And I have seen an interview in which she's talking about her period with Patrick Hernandez in Paris, which, by the way, I will talk about in part 2 of this episode. And the interviewer asked her, "What is the Madonna look?" And she says, "You're looking at it. I can't describe it. I can't describe it. It's a combination of everything that I have seen and experienced." Which makes total sense. So if she wouldn't describe it then, I won't describe it either. But you know what I mean. In this picture, she's wearing metallic purple lipstick, cross earrings, a red bow, many accessories as was done in the 80s, and her boy toy denim jacket and a skirt, both with the motifs of her friend artist Kit Haring. I am planning that if I actually make it to Madonna's concert, I would like to be wearing some Kit Haring pieces myself. However, I do not want to mention Kit too much because my plan is to make an episode only about his artistic work at some point in this podcast because I also like his work a lot. In the music video for Borderline, Madonna is also wearing a Kit Haring skirt in some scenes, but I'm almost sure it is not the same one as in this picture. In the Borderline video, it is a longer version of this skirt. Let's start with Chapter 1, Madonna After Madonna. Christopher starts with this subtitle: "The singer doesn't have to thank any lucky stars for her newborn success. She's been planning this baby for a long time." And I think this subtitle is genius, so accurate, and it directly tells you what this interview is about. Madonna's success was not accidental in any way imaginable. The same Madonna we saw years later in Truth or Dare, maybe stubborn but definitely a hard worker, a go-getter, is the Madonna that took herself to the kingdom of pop culture by never stopping. Remember how the previous episode we were talking about John Lennon and Yoko Ono at the West Village in the 1970s? Well, let's move 10 years after that to the East Village now. At the moment this interview was done, Madonna had already made it. I mean, she was far from the music icon status she has now, but she wasn't anymore the girl from Michigan, for whom being the struggling dancer she was simply not enough, and who was dying for the type of attention that was going to take her to the top. Her voice and her sexy attitude had already been recognized at this point. Her debut album, that she fought so much to get right, had been released, had gone platinum, and after 40 weeks was still doing good in the charts. Also, her singles, Borderline and Lucky Star, had both been in the top 10 charts. I was born in 1987, so I didn't live these early Madonna times when it was happening, but I have heard people who did, saying that she was a phenomenon from the first moment. Teenagers were fascinated because she was not following the rules, and since her looks seemed to be attainable to anyone, they were all able to identify with her. Everyone was dressing as her. It was a revolution in many ways. Her debut album was so successful that at the point this interview was done, her follow-up album, Like a Virgin, was actually ready to be released, and they knew it was going to be even a bigger hit. But they were postponing the release date to let the first album has its moment, I guess. Chris, however, says that at this point, at least on New York's East Village, even though almost everyone would recognize Madonna, she was still able to freely walk on the street without anyone approaching her on a dangerous way. They met at a fancy restaurant named Evelyn's and they were drinking Campari. And he explains how at the time the East Village was in the middle of this huge gentrification. When Madonna had lived there years before, this place was full of meeting halls and places to eat, some of those Ukrainian, and all of those places were places with no complications, and those places were now being practically rounded and pushed away by these new hip, fancy places that were opening every day. But they were still places that reminded Madonna the place the East Village was before. At some point, she tells Chris, quote, "The first apartment I ever had all by myself was on 4th Street and Avenue V. And it was my pride and joy because it was the worst possible neighborhood I could ever live in," end quote. And it makes total sense if we're talking about Madonna, doesn't it? Chapter 2, Suggestive Persona. The next topic that Chris talks about is the music videos. He basically says that Madonna's voice, which he calls siren-like, almost takes a second spot after her music videos. He says they, I guess meaning Madonna and her team by then, had rediscovered how to project raw sex appeal. He talks about the video for Borderline and the eroticism of Madonna on the video of Lucky Stars. He says, quote, "Her breasts and bottom thrust at the camera, index finger teasingly tucked into her mouth," end quote. And he also talks about the way Madonna seems to be desperate to tear her white dress off her body in the video for Burning Up. I'm burning up for your love. I'm burning up for your love. Which is one of my favorite songs and videos on that album, as you can listen. I can listen to Burning Up for hours. And even though I see all he's saying about these videos, all this eroticism, and what a rebel she was, and how fearless she was, and how in control of herself she looks there, and how ahead of her time, well, the way I understand those times just before I was born, I can't stop thinking on how full of clothes Madonna is in all of these videos. She has like 50 accessories over her, and during the time I was growing up, my teen years, the music videos that were considered sexy were Dirty, with 2 R's, by Christina Aguilera and Redman, in which Christina is wearing a bikini and chaps and dancing in the floor of the dirtiest place you can imagine. Or Britney's I'm a Slave for You video, in which Britney and her dancers are dressed but straight up look like they are in a sauna, sweating, moaning, having an orgy. And with this, I am not saying that Madonna's videos from the 80s are less sexy than these other ones I just mentioned. What I am saying is quite the whole opposite. I think that later in this interview Madonna talks about this. But I think that what happened with Madonna is that she actually understood what sexy is and how to play with the suggestive. She understood that sex and eroticism is an attitude and not an outfit or the lack of it. Just look at the video for Burning Up. She's on the street and she's wearing a white long dress that covers her from neck to knees almost. And look how sexy she is on that video. I am not saying, and I would never say, that being naked is not needed. Listen, I have already said this. I think that at some point of my life, I may end up at a nudist community. The older I get, the less clothes I want to wear. But for me, nudism is not always about sex, and sex is not always about nudism. And I think that at the point in which this article was written, in which Chris writes about Madonna's two-piece outfits showing her belly, as if it was such a thing, and in a time in which that level of exposure was considered so much, the only way for Madonna to play with suggestion and eroticism was the way she did it, understanding that it's not about showing your body, but showing your desire, and that you are actually on fire from the inside. Madonna also understood that being in control of your right to explore and play with your own sensuality and your own body also gives you a feeling of freedom. And freedom was a key for her connection to the generation she was singing for, and for every generation. That is the reason why she is still selling hundreds of thousands of tickets a minute still now, which is a key of her success and legendary status. I also wanted to mention that when Chris is talking about Madonna's whole naked tummy exposed being such a thing, he says that her curves are on male minds everywhere, even though it was obvious that tons of lesbian women were into Madonna's bodies too. But of course, back then it was impossible to write that male and female minds were thinking of Madonna's curves. I guess not even in Rolling Stone. I am glad I can openly say that in this podcast, even if there is still people thinking that that is something inappropriate to talk about publicly. Okay, it's time to talk about ambition. Chapter 3, Ambition. At the time this interview was done, not only Madonna had a successful debut album, a second album ready to be released, a much better place to live in, she had a spacious love in Soho now, she had some fame, people would recognize her, some others were crazy about her, she was being interviewed by Rolling Stone for a possible cover, and in general she was doing much better with money. But she also had a movie deal with Orion Pictures. She was an official actress now. She was filming the iconic Desperately Seeking Susan with Rosanna Arquette, who would become a special friend for Madonna for some time. The role of Susan wasn't Madonna's first time acting in front of camera, but it was a bigger deal now. So it would not be difficult to imagine that going back to the East Village and recognize some of the places where she was some time before, struggling a lot and working hard to get where she was now, would make her feel some way. Chris says that at some point during the interview, Madonna looked through the window and he quotes her saying, quote, "Feels great to come back to this neighborhood and know I am not as poor as everyone else," end quote. Chris writes that it is too bad if that rubs you the wrong way, because that is Madonna's style. And to be honest, the way he writes it feels weird. Listen, Madonna has said before that she's not so proud of some of her behavior in the past, but can we judge her for feeling great that she was actually doing better than before? Or for doing better than the people on the street of that neighborhood back then? Or better than the girl she was before when she was there? This is why she works so much, to get to a better place personally, emotionally, economically. I don't know, maybe I am biased, but I can see a major problem with Madonna saying that. He then goes to talk about what she's wearing during the interview. Again, a two-piece with her naked tummy exposed, as he says. At this point, it seems as he is the one obsessed with the curves. However, I guess I don't blame him. I am gay. I love Madonna for the freedom her music and attitude inspire on me, for the powerful her music makes me feel, and for how fearless she is to talk about topics that I also need to talk about, and that still now some people consider unquestionable and indisputable. But if a guy or girl or anyone in between likes her in other terms, I understand and I respect it as long as they don't treat her in a way that is inappropriate or in a way that she doesn't feel comfortable with. Chris says that even though she's still dressed as in the videos, she is not acting in the flirty way you would anticipate as in the videos. Chris says that even though she's still dressed as in the videos, she is not acting in the flirty way you would anticipate. And I wonder, why would she? You are already sitting in front of her, interviewing her for Rolling Stone. He says, quote, "This is a woman who saves her sex bomb act for the times when the matter's running," end quote. Why wouldn't she? If she's not flirting with you while drinking Campari, there may be a reason, right? Keep it as professional as she is. She is in control of when, where not. And Chris Connelly from 1984 also needed to learn one thing here. Real superstars are never supposed to be predictable. Then he talks about her boy toy belt buckle. He basically tells guys not to get confused by that, because Madonna is not anyone's toy. And he's right. Chris says that as many guys have gotten their hearts broken by Madonna as the ones that haven't, because not all of them understood the most important part of her ambition to get to a better place, her ambition to actually be the best. and that some have regretted. About this, Madonna says, and I quote her, "I think most people who met me know that is the kind of person I am. It comes down to doing what you have to do for your career. I think most people who are attracted to me understand that. And they just have to take that under consideration," end quote. And exactly, you want to be with her, you have to understand that she won't stop her career to help you with yours or to cook for you. I think in the 1980s she may have been judged and criticized for saying that, even though she shouldn't have. But now, today, come on, Madonna was ahead of her time. But today, any girl could, would, and do say that openly, and almost no one would judge her, but her own grandparents and some other people is still behind these times. Maybe those girls should also thank Madonna for saying it openly back then. Madonna even says that if the guy is in the music business, you would expect him to understand the dedication she needed to have and the hours of work she needed to put into her career to get anywhere. But still, in that case, it doesn't work sometimes. She says most guys are the same outside or inside the music business. They all want the girl to put all her attention on them, of course. Chapter 4: Female Male Influences. We all can imagine that while growing up, Madonna was hugely influenced by her relationships with her siblings, in different ways, according to their lives and personalities, I guess. However, in this part of the interview, Christopher and Madonna only talked about her relationships with the people who influenced her from the parental roles: her father, her mother, and later on, her stepmother. In this interview, they talked about Madonna's childhood, which in a way helps you understand her personality if you pay attention to it. Her father, Mr. Silvio Ciccone, is a huge influence for her, and anytime you take a look at the relationship, you can see how important they are for each other, even now. When this interview was taken, Madonna, according to Christopher, was 24 years old, even though I'm not sure because she was born in 1958, as I understand. So it could mean this interview happened in 1982. But in 82, her debut album wasn't released yet, so this version doesn't match completely, I guess. She was born in Bay City, Michigan, not far from Detroit. Her father was the son of Italian immigrants, and he was a car engineer for Chrysler. He married Madonna's mother, a descendant of French-Canadian family, in 1955, and they had 6 kids: Anthony, Martin, who we can see on the Truth or Dare documentary released years later on the Blonde Ambition era, then Madonna, Paula, Melanie, and Christopher, the one who creatively worked with her in the beginning of her career, and years later wrote a book about his sister that wasn't pretty well received by her. Madonna was the older of the girls, and that is a little girl. She was named directly as her mother. Her name was Madonna Louise 14. Then when she got married, she took the name Ciccone from her husband. So she was named Madonna Louise Ciccone, just as her daughter. However, years later, when Madonna was in her teen years and she did her Catholic confirmation ceremony, her confirmation name was picked and added, and she became Madonna Louise Veronica Ciccone. But then, as I have mentioned in previous episodes, the first tragedy of Madonna's life, and all her siblings' life, happened when she was 5, even though in this interview Christopher says she was 6. I am not sure at this point, but I think she was 5 when her mother wasn't able to win the fight against cancer and died, leaving Silvio alone to raise their 6 children. In this interview, Madonna tells how this tragedy brought her even closer to her father. Since she was the older sister and now they had no mother, they had no woman between them. She felt as the main woman in the family. But then, when Madonna was 8, the second big tragedy of her life happened. One night, Mr. Ciccone announced to his children that he was going to marry John, their housekeeper, and he did. With John, he had 2 other children, Jennifer and Mario. Christopher slightly mentions, and I have to say that I'm talking about Christopher Connelly, the one that is making the interview, and not Christopher Ciccone, Madonna's brother. Christopher slightly mentions how these events with important male and females in her life may have influenced Madonna's way to relate to other women after that. There is a point in this interview in which it seems as if young Madonna took this wedding as a rejection from her father, who she loves so much. About Jean, if you have seen the documentary Truth or Dare, which I have already mentioned several times in this episode, and I have made episodes about, you saw the scene in which Madonna is in her dressing room in the backstage of one of her concerts in Detroit, and her father goes in to talk to her. The woman that is with him, I think that is his wife, Jean. At that point, they already had around 25 years married, and you can see the cordiality with which Madonna and her treat each other. So even though in this interview they don't go deep into the developing of their relationship, I can see that with the pass of time things got much better. She still today visits and has a good relationship with her father, who I think is still with John, but I don't know. I think I would never try to research more about this relationship or with the relationship with any of her siblings. It's too personal, and I would only mention what Madonna has been comfortable with telling herself and showing herself. About this, Madonna told Christopher, quote, "It was hard to accept her as an authority figure and also accept her as being the new number one female in my father's life. My father wanted us to call her mom, not her first name. I remember it being really hard for me to get the word mother out of my mouth. It was really painful. I hated the fact that my mother was taken away. And I'm sure I took a lot of that out on my stepmother. I don't know if this was the right way to proceed for the father. Personally, I think that relationships have to develop on its own terms. In this case, I think the children should have been free to call Jean mom when they were ready and if they wanted to. They had to respect their stepmother. But call her mom, that's a whole different story. But, and this is an important but, I don't think that I, neither you, should judge or criticize Mr. Ciccone. He became a widower pretty young and he was alone with 6 very young kids. Just imagine that. We shouldn't feel comfortable to criticize him if we haven't been there. He did what he considered was the best for him and for his children. And maybe it was, I don't know, because I wasn't there. Who are we to come and judge him? I don't even want to talk about this anymore. I personally think that from afar it looks like he did a pretty good job with his family. Chapter 5, The World of the Fantastic. The result of these pretty intense things that happened to Madonna during her younger years was that she ended up throwing herself into what Christopher calls the world of the fantastic. This is where the Madonna who creates the stories and turns them into songs, albums, music videos, and live shows was born. According to this interview, she attended several Catholic high schools and she acted on theater plays on all of those. She got interested in watching old movies wherever she could. She would also go and see every famous ballet company that would come close to where she lived. And she also got interested in all the Motown hits of the time. She would dance to this music in all the backyards of her friends. These are the times when the dancing became her passion, all through her teenage years. And this is also where her hard work and dedication showed for the first time. Madonna got used to take her classes early to be able to go and take her dance classes in Detroit after school. Her first time performing in front of a camera happened in these times also. When she was around 14 or 15 years old, she appeared in a 1-minute short film by Win Cooper, one of her classmates, who did some work with Sheryl Crow many years later. It was a Super 8 experimental project where we can see a young Madonna poolside wearing a bikini. First, she's eating raw eggs, spitting them, and laughing. Then, she's laying on the floor, another girl in a bikini comes and cracks an egg on her belly. Then, the girl leaves, and when she comes back, and with the effect of the song, the egg has fried on Madonna's body. The other girl eats the perfectly cooked sunny side egg, with a fork and knife from Madonna's belly. Something funny is that when Christopher mentions this in the interview, he makes a note about how even then that guy knew that Madonna's success was on showing her naked belly, or some idea like that. Which makes me remember how after the erotica era, Madonna said in an interview that one of the reasons why she did all she did in that era, the book, the album, the videos, etc., was related to the fact that during her whole career, a lot of people were very comfortable with justifying her huge success because she was sexy and not because she was talented. And we know that is true. She was portrayed like that, sexy but not talented. The narrative was always about her not being the best singer or the best dancer or the best nothing, just a girl that was successful because she was sexy. But let me tell you something. I think that when we talk about people who are the whole package, dancer, singer, actress, performer, writer, designer, creative, concept developer, having true charisma and charm, and all the things you need to have at the same time to be the best performer, to my consideration, Madonna is number one. And her staying current still now shows that. In this interview, I think that even though Christopher does mention her naked belly a lot, he does talk about her talent and her hard work too. So this interview, for an interview published in the mid-1980s, it's not so bad after all, I think. Chapter 6. The Ballet Teacher. It was in these times in which Madonna started being this focused artist she is, and she started basically learning everything possible because she already knew she wanted to be the best. When she met a ballet teacher that would be one of the first people to see that this student of his, Madonna from Bay City, had real potential. But I think that there is no better way to talk about this fabulous man than with Madonna's own words. Quote, "He used to take me to all the gay discotheques in downtown Detroit. Men were doing poppers and going crazy. They were all dressed really well and were more free about themselves than all the blockhead football players I met in high school. He made me push myself. He was constantly putting all that stuff about New York in my ear. I was hesitant, and my father and everyone was against it. But he really said, go for it." And thankfully he did. I'll make a note here. Taking a teenager to a club is questionable. I know, it is inappropriate and should never happen again. But before judging this guy or Madonna, let's question all our parents, neighbors, teachers, uncles and aunts for also going to clubs before being 18 years old back in the 1980s, and our grandparents for letting them go. A lot of questionable things happened in the past and still happen. But this guy showing Madonna the world he showed her was essential for pop culture worldwide, like it or not. In this interview, Madonna described this man as her introduction to glamour and sophistication, which we know is a huge part of what Madonna became later in several of her more important eras. This was a world she didn't know existed. She says this guy was strict but had a sense of humor. All this part of Madonna's story makes me remember the movie Billy Elliot, a small-town ballet teacher who finds real talent, real potential in one of the kids and puts that seed into the mind of this diamond in the rough to make it big. It's beautiful how movies talk about life, sometimes so literally, and sometimes we just need to connect the points. I wonder if I would have had someone like that to see something in me when I was little, and they would have told me I was worth it for something. Would my life have been different? I don't know the name of this man and if he is even still alive, but thanks, you are an icon too. Maybe all those things you showed her, all those places where you took her, were the places where she got free enough to free so many of us, so thanks. I am going to be honest, there is still a lot to talk about here, but this episode may be getting too long already and we haven't even get to Michigan University yet. So I will stop here. I'll talk about the tour now, and on another episode, part 2 of this one, I will keep exploring Madonna's first Rolling Stone cover article. Now let's talk about the Celebration Tour. Okay, so when recording this episode, it has been already over 10 days since Madonna announced the tour. I think it is tour number 12 and it is being produced by Live Nation. And the announcement was pretty cool. They basically recreated the legendary Truth or Dare scene from the documentary Madonna Truth or Dare, of which I have talked a lot about in previous episodes of this podcast. The people at the table were Diplo, Judd Apatow, one of my favorite directors. Also in the table were Jack Black, Lil Wayne, Bob the Drag Queen, who is going to be a special guest in all the shows of this tour. I love you, Bob, but I envy you right now. Come on, how did you get that gig? But I wish you the whole best also, and I'm so proud of you. In the table, there were also Kate Berland, Larry Owens, Meg Stalter, Eric Andre, and Amy Schumer, who was the one designated to their Madonna to go on tour and perform her 4 decades of hits. I am not the craziest fan of Amy, but wow, Amy, thank you for doing that, even if it was scripted. Madonna ended up accepting the dare, and here we are, all ready and excited. I have to also mention that days before, there were a lot of rumors that this tour was coming. I was waiting for this like for a week at least, checking her Instagram account every day. Then one day she archived all her previous feed and it was obvious that the tour was coming. It did a few days later and I at least went crazy. They announced the tour, posting new art and the Truth or Dare recreation video. I had been talking about this with my husband for years. We had said, if Madonna tours again and we can go, we are going, no questions asked. The tickets went live for the members of the Madonna official fan club on January 17 and then for everybody on January 20, 2022 at 10 a.m. My husband and I set a ticket budget of $650 per person, so $1,300 between the two of us, and we were there very on time on day 20. When the online sale started, we got in line and the position we got was over 2,000 people before us. But it moved quickly and 12 minutes after the sale started, we already had the tickets. We went a little over the budget, but not much, and our seats are great, so we're set to go. We still don't have everything ready. We have had problems to find a new daycare for our dogs, but we still have some months to figure this out, and I hope we do. I have to say that tickets sold so fast. So many shows went sold out in minutes. In fact, I read this tour has been considered such a phenomenon in which 800,000 tickets were sold in 1 week. And at this point, it looks like they are opening new dates every day. And I'm pretty excited. Talk about excitement, talk about relevance, a tour that sells so well. Where are all those people that used to say that Madonna was not relevant anymore? See? Talk facts. A few days ago, Madonna posted a video thanking the fans for such support for the show, and she did it in such a humble way. She even said she doesn't take this for granted, and I'm so happy for her. Her career has been really important for many of us, and it does need to be celebrated and celebrated and celebrated with her if we have the chance. Something else that happened in these 10 days is that the cover for the next Vanity Fair magazine issue of several countries, including some video material too, were published, and Madonna is there on the cover dressed literally as a Madonna, then like Jesus, and then also as Frida Kahlo. Beautiful artistic pictures, and I'm so happy to be living these great times for an artist so dear to me. Of course, there's people upset because according to them, she is disrespecting the church. Of course, they had to be there. Something else that happened in these days is that a biopic about Madonna's life that I think was going to be directed by herself with actress Julia Garner playing Madonna was cancelled. I don't know the details. And I don't know if the project is ever coming back. But this is not a podcast in which I talk about news, so I won't try to get too deep on the details. I guess that wasn't the right project for some reasons, at least at this time. And I'll make another note here. Some old rumors about Madonna are coming back, pretty bad stuff related to Malawi. I am just saying this in case you're wondering why I haven't said a thing about that, because I want you to know that even though there is a big chance I am biased, I will also not be blind when and if it is needed. If I see some court statement that says some of these things are real, I will maybe not make an episode about that, because that is not what this podcast is about, but I will make an statement then. That is not what this episode is about. This is a celebration of the career of a great artist who definitely helped me free my soul and whose music inspired me a lot, inspired me to be a better person and love myself the way I am, proudly. Back to the episode. This tour is supposed to be a celebration of all her albums, but we know that all her tours are related to a specific album and aesthetic, so there are rumors. I think it may be possible that she has a new album ready to be released before the tour. If we consider the last year she released a couple of singles, it's possible that there's something else coming for the fans, and I'm so excited, new album or not. She already said she's getting in shape for the tour. And believe me, I am too. I heard that Madonna has also been asking fans what songs we want her to perform on the show, which is honestly so nice. And in my case, I would actually trust that the producers know and Madonna knows. In my case, I love all her music. I know the lyrics to at least 90% of all her songs, so I will have a party anyway. I mean, we all know Vogue and Express Yourself have to be there, but I would also love songs like Burning Up to be there, and of course Don't Tell Me, which is basically the song that defines my teenage years. That melody and vibe is the soundtrack to who I was in those days, or at least who I was inside and wanted to be outside. I would only want this tour to keep the music true to the Madonna of every era, as much as possible. Make me feel in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. There are tours, for example, in the Sticky and Sweet, in which those cool versions and mixes were just perfect. But for this one, if I am going to go to a Madonna concert wearing some Kid Haring pieces of clothes and Madonna is singing Borderline, I would like Madonna to make me feel the way you would feel in a concert in the 1980s, specifically someone like me, that I was born in the 80s, but I never enjoyed a concert in the 80s because I was a baby. I want to live that now. But that is just my opinion. Madonna has always been free and she always knows what is right for her shows, so I trust her. Wow, that was a lot of talking about Madonna, and it was as fun as it always is. Remember, this is part 1 of this episode. On part 2, I will be talking about so many other parts of the beginning of her career. Stephen Bray, the first years of Madonna in New York, The Breakfast Club, the times when Madonna was a backup dancer for Patrick Hernandez. Also about Jelly Bean Benitez, the first time Madonna was signed with Sire Records, and so many other interesting topics that she talked about in this first cover she did with Rolling Stone. So if I was you, I would add my podcast to your favorite ones, share it on all your social media, explore some of my previous Madonna episodes, and come back for the next one. If you made it all the way here, you are an icon. That is it for today. Thanks for listening and come back for the next episode. Bye!